I'm Kathleen Henderson from Roots and Boots, and I'm going to bring you along with me as I save seeds from a few of my plants. So as you can see behind me, there are a couple of things that I'm allowing to go to seed. I have some carrots that are flowering and they will go to seed. I have lettuce back there that is going to seed. And the thing about letting plants go to seed is that they will get huge, bigger than you thought possible. And depending on your preference for aesthetic, they might kind of ruin your look. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. You might even want to consider that when you are planning where to plant things. You might want to plant a few things like more out of the way, out of eyesight, and plan to save seeds from those plants while you can pull the rest of the plants and get them out of there and keep things looking tidy. But anyway, I usually like to keep things pretty tidy here in my kitchen garden, but when I decide to let plants go to seed, then things get a little out of hand. But it is what it is. Another thing to keep in mind is that it will take a long time. So those plants will continue to take up real estate in your garden long past the time when they normally would. For instance, this lettuce, all of these lettuce plants behind me, they would normally have been pulled a while ago and I would have that space back. In fact, I interplanted them with onions, planning to do that very thing. I would pull the lettuce and then the onion bulbs would have a chance to bulb out. But I decided kind of haphazardly to allow them to go to seed, and now they're taking up all of that space. And again, they're in a spot where I would rather not see their big bushy flower stalk. So just keep in mind that if you're going to save seed, those plants are going to be in the ground much longer than they would have been otherwise. And then thirdly, wherever those plants are allowed to go to seed, they are most likely going to drop some of that seed, and you're going to have volunteer plants in that spot next year. It's not a big deal. You can either allow the volunteer plants to grow where they grow, or you can pull them just like weeds. You can even try transplanting them depending on what they are. Maybe not with the carrots, but things like lettuce, or here is cilantro. You can try transplanting it and putting it in a place where you want it to grow. This is cilantro that I obviously allowed to go to seed. These brown dried seeds are the seed, and there are still some green ones on here. I'm actually not sure if I harvest this now if those will dry and become brown and turn into viable seeds, or if I'll lose the chance to use those as seeds. But as you can see, I have like more than a lifetime supply of cilantro here already in brown seeds, so I don't really care if I lose some of those green seeds by harvesting them now, because what I don't want to happen is for all of these seeds to fall on the ground and grow a huge crop of cilantro there next year. I'd rather keep my cilantro growing inside my raised beds if at all possible. So I have my brown paper bag. I've already cut some of the seeds and I have something to cut with, and literally I'm just gonna snip off all of these seed heads, the entire stalks and branches, and add them to this bag and forget about them for a while. I'm gonna let them dry. So I just snipped off some of these stalks and I'm gonna add them to this bag, and that is really how simple it is. So now I've got my bag of cilantro seeds still on their stalk. I will set this aside and let it dry for a while, probably like for months. And then what we tend to do is during the winter, if we have inclement weather, like if we have a rainy day, or if during the winter when it's cold and we're low on outside chores, when our farmhand is here on Saturdays, I will task the kids with, we'll spread something out and they will get out the stalks and they'll, with their fingers, remove all the little seed heads and get rid of the stalk. And that is how we save seeds. Then we'll label them. Once they're dry like that, then we can put them in a jar, an airtight jar. Although when I do store them in a jar, I do try to keep the lid somewhat loose, because while it's good to keep them in a container to preserve the longevity of the viability of those seeds, I think that it's not a good idea to close them up super tightly, because if there does happen to be any moisture or something like that, then that can become a problem. You could even add a couple of, like a handful or a couple of grains of rice to the jar to absorb any moisture. But I store my seeds in glass jars all the time and it's worked just fine. So that is how to save seeds, and a few things to keep in mind if you're planning or toying with the idea of saving seeds from some of your plants.